Mike, with spring practice well underway, big recruiting weekend for the Fighting Irish centered around spring practice. So, what were your takeaways from last weekend?
Yeah, Darren, there were a handful of 2025 commits. You had a few notable class of 2025 targets, and then a few, more like I think it was close to 10 class of 2026 players, so current high school sophomores going into their junior year in the fall, guys that Notre Dame offered on Pot of Gold Day last week. So it was a pretty busy recruiting weekend for Notre Dame. On Monday afternoon, wrote an article titled "The Gold Standard," where I went into some of the big talking points that come out of the weekend, and we'll cover that a little bit in today's video, and definitely recommend folks check that out over at blueandgold.com. But I'd argue the biggest visitor for Notre Dame this weekend is Deuce Knight. He's been committed to the Irish since September, but when you have a 6'4.5", 200-pound quarterback committed, who runs in the 4.5 range and a 40-yard dash. Yeah, it's always important when he's on campus, and it's been notable that Alabama, Ole Miss, and even Deion Sanders in Colorado have continued to push for him despite his commitment to the Irish. And he hasn't taken any visits to my knowledge, nor does he have any visits set up, but he's still in communication with those schools. So you want to make sure that you're getting Deuce Knight to campus as much as possible, and that's what he did. He got to South Bend late Wednesday night. Was greeted by a handful of media members, which is interesting, and then full day Thursday, full day Friday, and then most of the day Saturday. So he had a really good visit, great time with the Notre Dame coaching staff, and then on Saturday, I'll add this that one source kind of compared Deuce Knight and how he was with these other prospects, like Drake Bowen. Darren, if you remember, in all of our times chatting about Bowen in the 2023 class, such a great ambassador for Notre Dame, visited just all of the time, and he wouldn't come to campus for himself to get any new experiences. It was really just to recruit other prospects. And when you had a bunch of other players on campus Saturday, I was told that night was kind of like free roaming, just really wanting to build relationships with the other prospects on campus, and kind of did his own thing in a very good way. Recruiting guys like Mark Zachary and Derek Meadows, who we'll talk about in a second, who are big 2025 targets for the Fighting Irish. So really good visit for Notre Dame. My sources are pretty excited. Obviously about Knight, but how good they're feeling about him. I think for a minute there, you're concerned about Alabama, and you should still be to some extent, because he's still in communication with those schools at least a little bit. But yeah, you feel good coming off of this visit. I asked him if he's going to return for the spring game in April. He was like, I mean, I don't have anything locked in, but if the commits are going to be there, then I will be. And I was like, I mean, they're going to be there. That's always a huge recruiting weekend. And he has his official visit scheduled in June. So he's continuing to get to South Bend. Darren, that was his 7th visit to campus. It sounds like 8 will be for the Blue Gold game next month. And then number 9 will be the official visit in June. And you certainly expect him to return for the fall a couple times. So that's definitely big. Deuce Knight, returning to Notre Dame. And then Notre Dame's already getting a head start on the 2026 class, Darren. We talked about this a good bit. At the quarterback position, Noah Grubbs from the Orlando area, he was on campus Friday and a little bit at Saturday. His visit exceeded expectations. All of the visits you expect to go well, but this one went tremendous. I think we've been talking about this, I think, between Noah Grubbs and Brady Hart, who is a 6'5", I believe like 185, 190-pound passer, also from the Sunshine State. I think Notre Dame's going to get one of these two guys in Grubbs and Hart, and Notre Dame would be ecstatic. Definitely check out the Gold Standard for more on Noah Grubbs. And then from Indianapolis, Ben Davis. I feel like, Darren, we talk about him every single week. This 4-star cornerback. His visit went really well. I think this is a Notre Dame Florida battle. He did grow up loving Florida, but I like where the Irish stand for Zachary, especially coming off this visit. Derek Meadows from Las Vegas, Bishop Gorman. Notre Dame leads here, and I think that the Irish lead even more for this 6'5", 185-pound receiver from Nevada. Really good visit here. Connects well with Deuce Knight. Notre Dame had 3 other receiver commits on campus this weekend in the 25 class. Those guys connected well with Meadows. Really liking where Notre Dame stands, despite some other big-time programs being after him. And then I would love someone to tell me, because I forget, the last player Notre Dame had from modern day.
Mhm.
Notre Dame just has not had great success in recent years at this powerhouse program in Southern California. They would like to flip their fortunes here with Chuck McDonald, a 4-star cornerback in the 2025 class. USC, Oregon, LSU, Georgia, some other teams to watch here. But hearing that McDonald's looking at getting back to South Bend after this visit, which is definitely a good sign. Follow the visits is my mantra. McDonald getting back to Notre Dame, potentially in a couple months. That's good news. But I still feel like USC probably the team to beat for Chuck McDonald. So there were other visitors on campus over the weekend. You can definitely read more about those guys at blueandgold.com.
Mike, a couple of follow-up questions from the quarterback conversations we just
Sure.
had. I know it depends on personality and openness and those type of things, but isn't there something about a quarterback that is willing to be involved in the recruiting process? It's one thing if it's a receiver, a running back, but it just seems like the quarterback position is a little different and people draw to that quarterback. And it sounds like with Deuce's personality and willingness, they've got a really good asset to work with in this recruiting process.
One of my favorite things in listening to Colin Cowherd over the years, Darren, is that he'll say that the quarterback is always the most confident kid. The good looking, confident kid ends up playing the quarterback position. Other people just are attract to and gravitate towards the quarterback. So it's definitely good to have your quarterback locked in, have a high profile guy committed early. And listen, Deuce Knight is a really cool kid. The other prospects love hanging out with Deuce Knight, and he plays the most important position on the field. So there's just a lot of different factors that tie into what you're saying that gives Notre Dame an edge on the recruiting trail. And Darren, I always downplay a little bit prospects recruiting each other. I think it gets hyped up a little bit, like a little bit too much, like, oh, Notre Dame gets Deuce Knight. Well, now every receiver in the country is going to want to come to Notre Dame. Okay, Notre Dame fan. Like, we got to calm down a little bit. But I'm talking to Notre Dame sources, and they really they rave about Deuce Knight as a recruiter, and talk about just how much of an impact he is on the trail. So I mean, CJ Carr, I think, was like that as well. These high profile guys who commit early to Notre Dame at the quarterback position, they do have an impact. Now, listen, when these guys commit, it's not like 5 stars are going to start flocking to Notre Dame, but they definitely do play a role.
And in regard to the 26 quarterbacks that you were discussing a moment ago, is this a situation, in your opinion, that the first of the 2 that commits is the guy Notre Dame takes? Are we at that point they're comfortable with both of those guys? Whoever pulls the trigger first is probably going to be the guy?
There are nuances, but my understanding is an emphatic yes.
Okay.
There's differences between Brady Hart and Noah Grubbs. Like maybe this guy does this thing a little bit better and this guy needs to improve on this compared to the other guy. But my understanding is that the Notre Dame staff is very comfortable with either. They've communicated to both prospects it is first in between you two, which I think has kind of pushed up their timelines a little bit. And I think it also is a factor that one of the top quarterbacks in the country, a kid from Tennessee, he just committed to Georgia. So I think that these quarterbacks who are thinking, oh, I want to commit at this point, maybe after my junior season, whatever it is, when they see one of their peers commit, they're like,
The
so
dominoes.
quarterbacks are starting to come off the board. So, yeah, I think it's going to be Grubbs or Hart. Personally, my prediction is for Hart. I did that last week, and I believe we talked about it, Darren. But I wrote in my article where I wrote the prediction, like I could see a scenario where Grubbs pushes up his timeline and pops before Hart does. Either way, I think Notre Dame would be very happy with Noah Grubbs or Brady Hart, both really good players. And I think back to our conversation about Deuce Knight, I think both guys would do well helping build Notre Dame's class early on. But there's also a scenario where like Noah Grubson could get a Bama offer, and then Brady Hart's a Florida legacy, and the Gators just offered him. Like, there's a situation where Notre Dame doesn't get either of these guys, but then they have Troy Hun visiting on Wednesday. He's an impressive passer from California. Brady Schmeigel is another quarterback from California who I think Notre Dame's in a really good position with, both highly touted 4-star quarterbacks. So you got 2 from the Sunshine State, 2 from the Golden State. I think that Notre Dame's built out its quarterback board in a really good way, Darren, that they're going to land one of these guys, and it's going to be a strong get.